Okay, guys, today we're going to be going through our last lesson for Chapter 1, our directional anatomy and body markings. Now, I want to go ahead and stress that this is just an overview and that your textbook that's posted in Google Drive has the vast majority of the vocabulary. We are basically going to go through the directional terms to give some special focus to them. So, special terminology is used to prevent misunderstanding. Now, the exact terms are used for position, direction, regions, and structure. Now, to really focus on this, we see in figure 1.5a, we have all of these anterior body landmarks. This is definitely a figure that you're going to want to bookmark to come back to it. If you have the ability to print it off at home so you can reference it, that would probably be a good idea, and we'll certainly be using it in our assignments today. Okay, so we see our posterior body marks here. We have ones that pertain to the back, upper limb, lower limb, so forth, and so on. Now, I want to talk about anatomical position. So anatomical position is what we see right here. It is when you're standing upright with feet spread to the shoulders and your palms facing forward and your thumbs facing out. So let's go through these real quick. So superior refers to towards the head, end, or upper part of a structure or the body. Okay, so you might commonly say above. So an example of this, the forehead is superior to the nose. So inferior, we see the word caudal here. We're not really going to use caudal too frequently. We say that it is away from the head, or toward the lower part of the body or structure. Okay, so commonly referred to as below. Ventral being towards the front of the body. Okay, so we see this arrow pointing towards the front of the body. We see dorsal or posterior being toward the back side of the body. Medial towards the midline, lateral away from the midline. Proximal and distal. So let's talk about proximal real quick. Now, proximal refers to towards the origin of a body part. Okay, we typically use proximal and distal when referring to the limbs of the body. Okay, so your arms and legs. So you would say the elbow is proximal to the wrist, or that the wrist is proximal to the knuckles. Okay, so we see distal here. This is further away from the origin, so it's the opposite of proximal. So you would say the knee is distal to the thigh, or the toes are distal to the knee, so forth and so on. Okay, lastly, we have superficial and deep. Superficial is toward the body surface, so the skin is superficial to the skeleton. You would say that the lips are superficial to the teeth. And then deep is opposite to that. So you would say that the bones are deep to the fingernails. Okay. Now, I'm sure that some of you have noticed by now that all of these are paired opposites. So that is really the best way to remember them, and also just to practice them, just to continuously try and use these, because we'll be using them throughout the entire course. Okay, so we also have body planes and sections. Now, a sagittal section divides the body into left and right parts. So it's along a vertical line because, again, we are in anatomical position. So a medial section, median or mid-sagittal section, divides the body into equal left and right parts. So we take that sagittal and then we add mid. So that is only going to be superficially though. Okay, when we say equal left and right, we don't mean identical. Okay, so frontal section divides the body or the organ into anterior and posterior parts. Transverse divides the body into superior and inferior parts. Okay, so figure 1.6 outlines all of these in good detail, and you can see. Okay, so again, with this median or mid-sagittal, you can see by looking at this frontal or coronal plane right here and the transverse plane that not everything is going to be identical on the left and right side of the body within or deep. Okay, so our body cavities. Now we have several body cavities. We have the dorsal body cavity. It is actually two separate body cavities: the cranial cavity that houses the brain, the spinal cavity that houses the spinal cord. These are completely surrounded by bone. This is incredibly important because it's going to protect the brain, spinal cord, and we need to do that because it's very, very fragile tissue. The ventral body cavity is going to be technically 3 body cavities. The thoracic cavity, this is formed by the rib cage, and it houses the heart, lungs, and others. It is also a passageway for the esophagus and for the airway that passes from your nose to your lungs. And then the abdominopelvic, hence its name, you have the abdominal cavity, the pelvic cavity. We frequently combine those. It houses the digestive system, most of the urinary system, part of the lymphatic system as well. Okay, so we see right here our divisions with the dorsal body cavity, cranial and spinal, the ventral body cavity, the thoracic, separated by the diaphragm from the abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity, collectively referred to as the abdominopelvic cavity. Now, we also have quadrants, hence their names. Now, I know you're looking at this and you're like, well, why is the right side labeled left and the left side labeled right? Well, that's because we are in anatomical position. Okay, so this refers to the left side of the body that you are actually examining and the right side of the body that you are examining. So this is a good example right here of seeing how internally or deep in the body that the right and left sides are not identical. However, superficially they may be. Okay, so we also have our abdominopelvic regions. We have the right and left hypochondriac being the most superior, right and left lumbar being the medial, medial, the right and left iliac being inferior. And then along the midline of the body, we have the epigastric, umbilical, and hypogastric regions. Now, within there, we can see the organs that are present. And again, you can see that deep in the body, those are not going to be identical or between left and right as they would be superficially. If you have any questions, make sure to post in the comments below or send an email to mr.tucker.schs@gmail.com.